You know that feeling when you're at a restaurant and you can't decide what to get? The ribeye or the T-bone? Oh, they both sound so delicious. Now what if you had to make that decision with high-end monitors? Hey, I'm Nicholas from Ratings.com. Today we're comparing the ASUS ROG Swift PG32UCDM and the Samsung Odyssey OLED G8, which is also known as the G80SD. The specs are very similar between the two, 4K 240Hz QD-OLEDs with a 32-inch screen. If you've seen our recent recommendation videos, you know that we're often putting these two up against each other for the top picks. And we know there's a lot of debate online about which is the best. Today we're going to give a full breakdown of them. So which is the better monitor? Or rather, are either of them really better? And which one should you get? Let's start with the first thing we see, the design. The Samsung looks pretty simple, while the ASUS is heavy on the gaming look. The ASUS has branding and RGB lighting on the back and even below the stand. They're both made of a mix of metal and plastic, but the ASUS feels a bit more solid. Even with that, looks aren't everything. The Samsung comes with a more ergonomic stand, as you can swivel it, which you can't do on the ASUS. So if you often need to adjust your screen for someone next to you, the Samsung is the winner. Once you turn them on, you'll see some more differences. The Samsung has a built-in smart platform and comes with a remote to change settings. It has all the neat things you could get with a smart device, like a voice assistant feature. You could also stream all kinds of content even without your PC. On the other hand, the ASUS is more like your typical monitor. You'll have to change settings with a joystick and buttons underneath the bottom of it. But while we're on the topic, let's talk more about the extra features that each monitor has. Starting with the ASUS, it supports Dolby Vision once you update the firmware. This is great for sources that use it, like an Xbox or a streaming device. Plus, it has a KVM switch that makes it easy to change sources and use the same devices connected to the monitor, like your keyboard and mouse. It also has an optical audio output, which has better audio quality than if you were to just use the audio jack. The Samsung is a bit different though, because it has an ARC port for pass-through to a soundbar or receiver. This is pretty useful as it doesn't have a typical audio jack that you'd normally find on monitors, so there's still a way to get sound. And it even supports Bluetooth if you prefer connecting headphones like that. All of this combined with the smart platform makes it a small media center. Maybe not exactly what you need in a gaming monitor, but it's a nice added perk. Besides that, they each have your standard HDMI 2.1 and DisplayPort 1.4 inputs. They each have USB hubs too, but the main difference here is the USB-C port on the ASUS, which the Samsung doesn't have. It supports DisplayPort Alt mode and 90 watts of power delivery, so you could connect your laptop to work on it and charge it with one cable. Alright, these are obviously great to know, but how do they perform? To start off, because they have the same panel type, there are a lot of similarities when it comes to the picture quality. A perfect contrast ratio, no blooming, wide viewing angles, and bright and vivid colors. Just all those great things you expect in a QD-OLED. We need to really split hairs to find any differences, so that's what we're gonna do now. When looking at how bright they get, you have to think about how you're going to use them first. If you're working or just doing general web browsing, you may want to use the uniform brightness setting on the ASUS to avoid any distracting changes in brightness. In that case, the ABL isn't aggressive, and both monitors have similar brightness. But if you turn the uniform brightness setting off, then the ASUS gets much brighter, which is great to use for gaming or watching content in bright rooms. That said, the brightness is a lot more similar in HDR. Any differences are hard to tell. They each get very bright and make small highlights stand out, with larger highlights being dimmer. They both display content at the brightness that the creator intended, but the Samsung is just a bit brighter than it should be. But again, really hard to tell. What's pretty neat for both is that there are different settings and picture modes you could choose from in HDR, so you can adjust them to your liking. And while we're talking about how bright they get, we also have to talk about how they look in a bright room. That's where you'll notice a difference with their screen coatings. The ASUS is glossy and the Samsung is matte. So what does this mean? Each coating has its pros and cons. The glossy coating has a clearer image, but bright light bounces off the screen kind of like a mirror. The matte coating solves this issue by spreading light out more, but the image is hazier. But one big advantage of the matte coating is that blacks don't look as purple in bright rooms as on the glossy coating. While choosing one over the other is a personal preference, you might want the Samsung if you have a bright room, and the ASUS if you're in a dimmer room. On top of that, they both have sharp text, but the Samsung has the advantage here. This is because fringing around letters is less visible. They both do have fringing though, and whether or not it bothers you changes from person to person. How about gaming? Are there any differences here? The simple answer is no, but the long answer is yes. You can reach the max refresh rate on each over both DisplayPort and HDMI connections. Your graphics card needs to use DSE to reach that with 4K resolution, but the ASUS actually has a setting to disable DSE if you prefer not using it at all. Of course, both have pretty much the same very sharp motion handling thanks to their near instant response times. The ASUS actually has a BFI feature to reduce persistence blur, which the Samsung doesn't have. But it's pretty limited in how you can use it because it only works at 120Hz and not at the same time as VRR. And while motion is pretty similar between the two, there's more of a difference in terms of input lag. Even though the ASUS has lower input lag at its max refresh rate, it's lower on the Samsung with 60Hz and 120Hz signals. You likely won't actually feel this difference, but it could still be the margin between winning and losing when gaming at those refresh rates, like on consoles. Speaking of which, both monitors can take full advantage of both the PS5 or Xbox Series X or S. So if you're a console gamer, you won't go wrong with either monitor. Just know that the ASUS supports Dolby Vision with the Xbox. And the last thing we'll talk about is VRR Flicker. This is something that pretty much any OLED has when there's changing frame rates. This happens with both monitors, and it's pretty distracting in dark scenes. But the Samsung has a VRR control setting to reduce the flicker, with some trade-offs though. It increases the input lag and causes stutter, so there's no perfect solution. So, with all that said, which monitor should you get? Why not both? Okay, just kidding. Or am I? If your budget only allows for one, then you have a decision to make. Because their performance is so similar, you'll have to think about the features and what your needs are. You might also want to think about which screen coating you prefer, but that's a personal choice. Basically, if you're willing to pay more for extra perks like Dolby Vision, or even if you just want the USB-C port and KVM switch, go for the ASUS. But there's a catch. It usually costs more than the Samsung, so that's why the Samsung is the best option for most people. The extra features just aren't worth the extra cost. Plus, it still has everything you'd expect in a gaming monitor, and the smart system is handy too. This is why the Samsung offers the best value for most people, but if money isn't an issue, the ASUS takes the cake. That's all for the comparison between the ASUS PG32UCDM and the Samsung OLED G8. If you want more details on the monitors, check out our written reviews. The links are in the description below. Until next time, I'm Nicholas from Ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. Ciao. Where we help you find the best product for your needs. Ciao. I hit this on. Should I do it again?
Yeah, maybe. Are you gonna say sorry again?
Sorry. There we go. See you in 2025, and happy holidays.